45 still alive. I hope that my speeches, Mideast war reports, are old history when you hear me. Nightmare past, every bomb silenced, and Gaza on the mend. The fighters, funders, and profiteers will be driving the next 20 wars, though, and probably this one for decades, if anyone lasts that long, unless you and I take away the tyrant's tools. So today's war story. After 6 months of massive unconditional bomb supply, American leaders finally threatened to slow down the genocide unless the IDF let in more aid trucks. Voila! Israel ushered in 800 trucks in 3 days. A Palestinian spokesman said that most still could not drive and distribute the aid where needed because the Israeli Air Force was bombing most of Gaza 30 days a month, as always. The Israeli spokesman denied nothing, but blamed the 8,000 Hamas hiding in tunnels for popping up to steal the food intended for 2.3 million. Their lawful duty to provide as many IDF soldiers as needed to guard and transport and distribute aid wasn't mentioned. The Palestinians said that starvation was so rampant that only 1,000 to 1,500 trucks daily for months could reverse it. For now, war business is still permanently crystal clear. Buy, sell, and drop bombs. Pay a little lip service to the pathetic laws that order, without enforcement, mass civilian murderers to make it okay with grossly insufficient aid to survivors. And necessary halt to the ferocious festivities? Of course not. 2.3 million Palestinian civilians need to die because 8,000 Hamas in tunnels are too lethal and hold hostage shields out front. Hamas can't release them. That would sign their 8,000's death warrants. Israel must keep the situation savage and static for years to keep the failed war prime minister in office and out of jail. American bombs arrive forever on orders from weapons company bosses. Allow in just enough trucks to slow down reports of mass starvation deaths. The last 250 wars did, and the next 250 will all obey similar weaponeer rules. Just keep maximum number and intensity of world wars going by the decade and century. Anything less would badly cut into Murder Incorporated profits. Also only maintained by keeping politician pawns in office by campaign fund bribery for the trillions in weaponeer government contracts. Stop 0% of the civilian genocide against toothless world law, and cough up 5% of victim relief aid, winking at that spit-upon law. All the PR needed to keep the mostly ignored perpetrators from stinking as bad as their mountains of corpses. Today's deadliest: Sudan, Yemen, Syria, Ukraine, and Gaza explode, starve, and torture for profit more intensely than the other 44 wars, but all wreak total war on innocents for money, hate, and power. I beg every listener to either work for my laws to stop all this or research why my answers are amateur, useless, impossible, mistaken garbage. Professionals are poised with the real solutions that present leaders may be guided to achieve without that world organized in one citizen movement that this nutcase claims vital to our rescue. I hope that these speeches are heard in many nations. You need much better laws to help your endangered family and community to survive and thrive. Let's study the warriors' lawless financial, political, and military powers that have always abused most of us, and then design and exercise good, controlling counterpowers to checkmate the bad ones. For 2 million years, our only prey were animals that we killed to eat. Then, in a single night, alpha males killed farmers for their bread. Suddenly, 100 new powers exploded against human prey. Hunting instinct, often aggravated by double male chromosomes, grew animal hunting bands of 5 to million-man armies of conquest. The new prey/motives: land, money, glory, power, and hate. 15 empires of peons enslaved by handfuls of titans. Money was invented for exchange and commerce, but most importantly, to flow to kings and nobles. Nations' armies' purpose is often such theft, and to crush all other power, foreign and domestic, rightful or not. The emperor proclaims, "We must swell our army to 1 million to defend against the 50 nations infuriated by our attacks on their homelands by our first 500,000. Join and cheer, or you're dead." Less dominant nations are forced to grow their defenses, certainly handy to subjugate their own citizens. Armies can only be grown with propaganda for our flag, skin color, and religion. Magnificent reasons to hate and kill foreign others. Bigotry far less motivates leaders, really, after riches and power spoils of victory. Such men, over-infected with hoarding instinct, whether double wise or not, regard their 10,000 times share of valuables with hunger, infinitely larger than harsh enough calorie craving to stay alive with satisfying meals. For 10,000 years to this second, tiny elites with gigantic appetites schemed 16 hours daily to devise and inflict their wildly excessive acquisition schemes upon the overmatched, totally manipulated, subjugated world population. I am not describing all behavior of all controlling men. Both good and evil are pursued in infinite variety. I only stress that drives to power that killed or hurt literally billions were accomplished with actions made institutionally legal that caring citizens should have outlawed millennia ago, except we could not topple kings then. Today, Russians and Chinese will not soon be relieved of their mighty, martial, entrenched despots either. Yet you, in at least 170 nations, are capable of storming your national lawsuits and international treaties. First, transform your many nations, then help the internet savvy throughout the worst dictatorships to organize, to improve, coerce, and change leaders that were finally taught to be as frightened as their totally endangered citizens. I focus this speech on human hunters' power, about to finish humanity, and your greater power to stop them, only at its organized, focused maximum, of course. What is a human hunter? One who hurts many to advantage a few. How do you stop them? By becoming the many who no longer ignore, instead analyze despots' major strategies, which will tell us how to disempower them. We will not take away the Powermeister's instinctive desire and aggression, nor shame them into new morality. So just focus on their tools, then fight and break them politically and legally, and build your tools, your new laws to conquer the conquerors. I've offered the laws to tackle bribery and huge armies, adding lawsuit, treaty, and political actions to eliminate both. You and I must never stop studying how the hoarding power thieves destroy virtually all human rights and good living conditions. Israel recently elected a leader who went to work on a large new package of laws, all designed to neuter independent judicial power, transferring most to the partisan executive and slight legislative majority. One of his obvious motivations was to destroy judges' actions to indict and try him for suspected crimes. His new laws will take away virtually every Israeli citizen's human rights and ensure that now oppressed Palestinians will be further ground down. Democratic check and balance government deliberately destroyed. Dictatorships all over the world always force their judges to dependably rule for the self and crony-only committed governments of thieving, warring little men, not fair laws. Then all three branches commence punishing all major disagreement and political resistance as crimes. I have already described the ever-increasing destruction of American democracy since 1947's National Security Memorandum 68. Lately, our corrupt, bigoted courts, Congress, and executives wreck voting rights, institutionalize and explode special interest bribery of 90% of legislators and executives, trash women's rights, environmental protection, and equal rights for the increasingly attacked LGBT community. Big money selects ever more partisan, not constitution-bound judges to finish our destruction. You have somehow endured my 10 hours of bad news exceeding positive inspiration, even if I do stress our essential critical reform achievements. So here's a modest bit of good news. Unrelenting Israeli crowds storm streets for weeks, battling the theft of everyone's rights. There is no sign, however, of a single corrupt legislator batting an eyelash, so the KG Prime Minister quietly prepares to push their fateful vote soon. Well, can we find a ray of hope from Georgia, one of many bullied little nations bordering Putin's Russia? Their nation's population has recently been infected with desires and plans to grow trade with and democratic inspiration from Western Europe. Unfortunately, their president is a pawn of Alexander Putin and decisively opposes his population's will and their specific proposed trade deal with Europe to relieve Georgia's increasing poverty, with his exactly opposite plan to instead tie the national economy to even more depressed Russia. Naturally, making increasing wreckage of Georgian human rights and citizens' autonomy, he also schemes and hammers at the behest of his pal Vladimir. Well, the poor, overmatched Georgian population might as well throw up their hands and surrender, right? They know when all of Asia's scorched earth power has them beaten down. Nation dead. End of story. Except I'm just pulling your leg. 500,000 Georgians have been storming the streets around every damn government building for months. Too many for the Quisling's entire police and military to stop. Today he bowed to the inevitable and withdrew his and Putin's entire suck-up-to-sick-bully Russia program. It may not be permanent, but this was the world's biggest human will and rights victory in many years. If I thought I could send 1 billion into the streets, I would shriek hours to that end. Too many street revolts fizzle and die, though, and terrible peril to your family's life for years ahead needs a legal revolution that will be advanced with letters, lawsuits, and treaties, effective more than marching feet, waving signs, and shouting slogans, though you actually badly need both. You, in your nation, must come up with a myriad strategies to gain survival and rights that I never imagined. I do argue for you to use my speech of rescue laws as a springboard to work for and implement your better and stronger reforms. Have you ever heard of another plan to even slow our extinction juggernaut? I beg you to work on genocidal and invasion weapon disarmament, including slashing monstrous armies 99% down to border defenses only. Also, do not rest until public campaign finance replaces every private dollar bribing, not gifting politicians. Only stopping war and dirty money offer any hope of keeping water and food enough for human survival. Did you know that a few billionaires and many millionaires' dirty, dark money buys scores of nations' destruction of democracy? The American Koch brothers have bought enough corporate propaganda to buy hundreds of American elections. Every legislator then for years delivering votes for assault weapons sold to teens, environmental destruction to enrich polluters, and trillions yanked from national health care to Murder International Incorporated. Another couple of billionaires funded most of the autocracy conspiracy that I described, about to turn Israel into a military corporate dictatorship rather like America. Russian billionaires' cash likewise funds propaganda, twisting the Russian electorate into sheep, passively acquiescing to their beneficiary. The world's richest $200 billion thief, Alexander Putin, and his war to destroy 100% of civilian Ukraine. The propaganda purchased? Ukraine, never mind being the home of heroic millions, gallantly fending off Russia's invasion since 2015, is really, from the president on down to every woman and child Putin keeps bombing, just a hotbed of Nazis and drug addicts that must either be ruled or murdered by the righteous foreign invader. Actually, the only Nazi seen to be savaging Ukraine and terror-murdering civilians is none other than Vladimir Putin, right? World citizen crushing has always been accomplished by brainwashing lies, bought by vast media money from jackals to steal 1,000 times your taxes for them. The billionaires funding Netanyahu's democracy murdering create propaganda that judges' power is merely being trimmed to check and balance equality with executive and legislative restoration. when in reality 100% of democratic rights of Israelis and properly someday for Palestinians will soon be rather secretly destroyed by a group of new laws designed to overrule any and all court justice with easy legislative and executive overrule, and then also converts the selection of judges to total partisan control by bought legislators and the prime dictator, minister. The only hope of peace for Israel, a Palestinian state, he steadily, permanently destroys by illegally building new Jewish settlements in their midst. All for war, for money. The same few filthy rich guys' private money poured disproportionately into public campaigns the world over buys ever more private welfare and world war to deny public good. Corporate over individual power often builds scorched earth militaries primed to attack a world of foreign and domestic enemies. Rich individual donors always represent corporate interests over consumers and coerce trillions out of our treasuries for them, not to mention more taxes out of our hides and less out of theirs. Environment wrecking for centuries is demanded and achieved by the bribing robber barons, all to temporarily advantage the 1% while destroying not just 99% of humanity, but quite soon to kill every top clown, dog, and their complacent, ignorant families too. Now, like in Georgia, millions of Israelis have hit their streets, but unlike Georgia, appear poised to succumb to fully corrupted lawmakers and executives. The Georgians won by hammering their own laws of justice and trade pacts for prosperity. Nearly all Israelis would be far better served to keep pressing to courts for decisions in their favor for every one the perpetrators overrule. Pound computers, not just streets. Every suit must rely on the end of legislator bribery, and every loud public demonstration name each filthy, non-representative, and evil executive to be fired by heroic, humane, and increasingly new candidates. Speaking of 1%, that's also the total of my pathetic smattering of information, insights, and legal repairs compared to the vast research, enlightenment, and political action that you must mastermind. Learn exactly how that top dog 1% ruins your world and future, then keep designing, demanding, and winning the laws to stop them. Simultaneously work at every public law and project to build our new, just, loving, survivable world. I can't expect, even if I hope, that my utterly amateur framework will make a major difference in human survival prospects. Our true thrill, drama, hopes, and accomplishments are going to come from you, many family lovers and experts who together will rescue your endangered communities, nations, and entire world to win all of our lives. Please remember that my every story is not about bad villains I condemn, but mostly very decent people given absolutely corrupting absolute power that you must take away to rebuild government, to stop destroying us and start saving us, with some wonderful new laws and projects that you must push like crazy. I'm going to leave you with a question. Is money really the root of all evil? Damn near is, I think. But doesn't it really come down to who pays who for what? By bad law against good law, or lacking any law so desperately needed? When do we fix this? My West Texas football coach would say, quick like! Today, Israel's prime minister extends his 6 months of Palestinian bombing and siege genocide long past his many opportunities to end the horrible war in exchange for the 150 hostages. He plans instead permanent military dictatorship, already 75 years proven the entire hopeless, furious impetus for Palestinian terrorism. Because his primary goal is another 75 years of war for profit and power. In rejecting Palestinian survival support to end his siege and fair treatment of them pending negotiation for their independent state, he denies his own citizens' security achieved no other way. So why, besides war power corruption by his business partners, does Benjamin Netanyahu destroy the safety and interests of most all Palestinians and Israelis? To stay out of jail. The day his warhorse reaches permanent ceasefire shore, a rapid post-mortem of his unnecessary savagery rushes an election he'll lose 5-1. Quickly his corruption indictments go to trial and likely conviction. An American candidate in 2024 for president who strove mightily and illegally to overturn his defeat in 2020 deliberately, desperately delays his trials for 88 felony indictments until he can squeak or cheat back into the White House to overrule all federal charges against him. His definition of justice he plans to enforce with giant presidential power to sic his personal Justice Department against his political enemies. Two of the most criminally militant nations in our world of 2024 are led, or sought to be led, by massively indicted men taking advantage of their nation's toxic tradition of making sitting presidents kings who can do no wrong. Survey modern history to find many maximum bosses who rush from outrageous, unconstitutional, unconscionable, illegal, but still traditional presidential immunity to monstrous crimes against domestic and world populations. Thank you very much. Don't mind if I do. Everybody says I can and get away with anything always. You whine about leaders dumping on us, but let 'em twist and torture all law to do it. Well, you can depend on me. For what? My every horror story comes with new law morals. All over the world, presidents tell their justice departments, don't let a single crook go unpunished, with 2 exceptions. You'd better treat any of my corporate or even criminal cronies with kid gloves so they can keep filling my campaign propaganda coffers. And however felonious that I personally become, my infinite importance to the nation must suspend me from all legal accountability that every other mortal in this nation must be held to. Why, me on trial, then locked up, would harm national security. Of course, so wonderfully enhanced with an active, unpunished crook in charge. So in every one of those nations, the president's attorney general, direct hire of him, job kept at his pleasure only, continues his department's quite self-serving hands off the king who can do no wrong. Tyranny enabled and cemented. Ready for your new laws, abused peons? Removed from a president's powers shall be any control over his Justice Department's investigations and prosecutions of him and any of his personal, political, or financial pals. Should he fire any Justice Department leader of said prosecutions, an independent federal investigator must explore the history of the president's possible law-breaking and meddling with investigation of him to determine if the president's legal jeopardy had nothing to do with his axing the troublemaker, or if evidence shows obstruction of justice the motive. Select a special, independent prosecutor to probably charge him with that crime too. Then remove his power permanently to fire any AG or prosecutor who's got him by the short and curlies. Most constitutions confer exactly zero criminal immunity from prosecution to any federal officer, presidents included, who are immune from a wide range of personal civil damage liabilities while in office. Various presidential power freaks argue that a president can't be criminally busted either. But in March of 2024, the U.S. Supreme Court laughed off a presidential criminal immunity claim. And rather few nations exempt their presidents from criminal culpability either, though large numbers with insane, weak, unjust, nation-destroying stupidity let their president rampage untouched while in office. So in your nation, sue your ass off against every presidential crime until every issue is settled in humanity's favor. And the charged with crimes president gotta blink at 12 jurors without deadly delay, just like the rest of us. We must all explore and increase the right of citizens singly and representing vast groups to sue any and all politicians evidencing criminal harm of us absolutely not in the course of lawful job duties, not for unconstitutional civil damage, just merely to uphold their oaths that our laws be faithfully executed. Another issue to resolve once and for all is presidential pardon power. The Constitution of America allows the president to pardon not only any who got convicted for federal crimes, but also to pardon specific federal crimes that they might commit in the future. The only exception being impeachment convictions. So yes, a president could get away with pardoning himself. Then either Congress impeaches and the Senate convicts and fires and bans him or her from lifetime federal office for crimes self-forgiven, but still in flagrant violation of his public care responsibility and oath of office, or voters electing partisan, corrupt, excusing, acquitting senators will get exactly what we deserve. The activists' strategy of legal recourse is very tough and complex, but our goals are shockingly simple. Democracy, not tyranny. Disarmament, not weapons of mass destruction. Humanity health, not drought removal of water and food, and CO2 removal, not more explosion, and government of total equality under the law, not of overpowerful, private interested men. Today, my inexhaustible NPR source reported that the United States for decades has prepositioned a huge weapons cache in Israel for the very instance now exploding in the Mideast, a big, hot war between Israel and surrounding enemies. For the first time in history, America has authorized our Jewish ally to dig into that special cache as needed, but only for white-hot necessities like slaughtering 40,000 and horribly wounding, often permanently maiming 80,000 Palestinian civilians. Sarcasm aside, the Hamas murder of 1,200 Jews and kidnapping 240 more actually necessitated gunning through all their tunnels while negotiating hostage release for a couple thousand Palestinian prisoners, plus ceasefire and the war's end and Hamas disarmament and Palestinian independence without Hamas terrorists in charge. The alternative being shoot dead every tunnel rat, including the hostages. No alternative, the bombing of a single, much less 2 million innocent civilians. The present American-Israeli war prosecution purpose was only to let Hamas live and hostages die while blockbuster bombing all Gaza and Gazans to ruins for years more weaponeer profits. A sickened, enraged world and growing like-minded fraction of the up-for-re-election American president's voting base forced him to advocate the ceasefire that far earlier would have prevented 100,000 non-combatant casualties had he not repeatedly hammered U.S. UN vetoes of ceasefire. He barely now hinted conditioning his next 2,000-pound bomb resupply on major increases of aid trucks, knowing that 20 times humanitarian aid crashes and burns alongside the continuing Holocaust that he fully intends. Is that my angry opinion and accusation? No, the American Congress readies tens of billions of dollars of Israeli attack resupply, and dozens of reporter queries about the endless bombs finally actually withheld to punish even worse and unceasing innocent blasting, siege, starving, and aid obstruction answered by soft, evasive, or negative replies, confirming that both nations' policies remain carte blanche, bomb flow and blow, from the advanced stocks, do massive resupply, are still both attackers' policy. Let's just hint at being a little nicer while we kill the next 30,000. Murder for profit can go on forever, but only with major lies. I mean PR. A little history from the war versus peace movements makes this 10,000th page of the war bestiality book fully understandable and predictable. In 1968, Vietnam War peace candidate Senator Bobby Kennedy swept towards Democratic Party nomination for president after a powerful peace movement forced war explosion architect President Lyndon Johnson to retire. Anti-war leaders are often dealt with by men of violence, though. Sirhan shot Bobby Kennedy dead in Los Angeles, just like warrior Putin in all likelihood had his anti-war opponent Navalny killed in a Siberian prison. Traditionally, wars are extended with lies too. Richard Nixon took the 1968 election with his secret plan to end the Vietnam War. His plan was actually to expand the classic B-52 2,000-pounder bombing to 4 nations for another 4 years, killing hundreds of thousands more, including 20,000 Americans, many teenagers. War leaders for 10,000 years won 99% of all contests with peacemakers. Military and civilian war leadership, including weapons manufacturers and their lobbyists' work, is a 10 hours a day, year in and year out profession. Peace campaigners and demonstrators rarely hammer peace law to fruition, almost invariably resorting to no percentage, pretty please. Then they seldom put in, except a few leaders, over 10% the consistent time and efforts of enthusiastic hobbyists. Still, millions of long, persistent anti-war demonstrators pressured Kennedy and Khrushchev into the nuclear test ban treaty, and would have elected peace candidate Robert F. Kennedy to the American presidency if not for his assassination. Democratic peace movements hope to persuade majorities to their cause and win crucial elections, putting new leaders for peace in power. Brief ceasefire slowdowns are thus occasionally won. War leaders are recruited by corporate bribery to empty treasuries for weapons and millions of soldiers' salaries and vast army bases. Money funds propaganda to recruit entire populations. World and national citizen war choice, anti-WMD and anti-civilian genocide law doesn't slow them down a bit. They just break it all, and only the 1% whiners notice. They just ensure, with every humming, trillion-dollar fueled cog, gear, and piston of this world war machine, that war for profit, power, and hate ever grows, never stops. Their ultimate, absolute power is the utter failure of anti-war law that actually dismantles the war machine with legal, enforced peace, justice, and democracy power and law. We love our families and fight to protect them. We dislike but do not hate the wars, mostly distant, that mostly kill other families' sons, so we rarely fight to end them. My speeches tell you to fully hate war that will soon crash into your living room. Our failure to combat global warming's drought, thirst, and hunger, and failure to build effective anti-war law will soon cause world depression and nuclear war, whereas all could be reversed and stopped by our cooperative, organized, legal revolution. So far, only a handful have legally fought against war, while hundreds of millions recruit billions to build and fight wars. Now you must fight against war, not by 50-hour weekly profession, but 1 hour of law building, or you and your family will suffer horribly and die extremely early, as we all will. Recognize the war builder's strategy. Money to buy politicians, to buy weapons with compulsory tax money they control and spend. Propaganda for hate gets soldiers ready to fight. Invasions make enemies who will counterattack. Then hatred explodes worldwide. allowing all candidates to compete to offer the most lethal military response to the very international horror they created for money, now to flow to them forever. Correction to imminent extinction. Notice that they built all this chain reaction from the first link, money to buy politicians. Outlaw that, and we'll elect leaders not to buy weapons and fight wars. School education between all world citizens, ordered by our treaty, begun well before our treaty, heals and vaccinates brains against hate and war propaganda lies. Invasions end. Enemies become friends. Abe Lincoln's best national defense. Then the nukes go off and nuclear winter kills us anyway. Unless you sue in federal court to enforce our present treaty's bomb ban until you build our better border defense's only treaty to accomplish world disarmament by all means necessary, including aid carrots and embargo sticks. Now you remember our treaty's full name, Swords into Plowshares. Disarmament savings for new fresh water on forests, into lakes and onto farms, plus mega CO2 atmosphere scrubbing to bring back our rainfall and temperate weather. All for two things. Long years of joy, not a few years of horror for you and your loved ones, and the very same for our great, 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 great grandkids.